Hello there, I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Inspired, and Those Who Inspire Me. I got a good friend back for another session, and he's just loaded with information. He's an author, and he's just the best in terms of his knowledge for architecture and from the celebrities and moguls who have lived in these structures. And I give you Bret Parsons.
Hey, thanks, Joe. I was just thinking, you and I and Barbara, your wife, go back 33 years.
Oh, geez.
That's when we met at Pacific Design Center.
That's right.
1992. We hit it off right then and there.
Well, I spotted you well. I picked my favorites.
Good taste.
So you're going to convey some interesting stories about the structures you have grown to know.
Exactly.
And what is the headline?
Basically, what we're talking about today is still a favored and favorite architect of many, Gerard Colcord. And he practiced in L.A. from the 30s into 1984 when he died in Encino. And he was very well known. They called him basically Hollywood society architect. He was to the manner born, elegant, tall, distinguished-looking gentleman, impeccable manners, impeccable dresser, and he was the king of what I call the Colcord Country Colonial style house, which took LA by storm, especially after World War II.
And why did it become popular?
There were a few reasons for that. One of the main reasons is after World War II, all the returning GIs needed a place to live. And many had gone through California, particularly Southern California, for Army basic training, and they got a taste of Southern California. And the translation of that is they loved the weather, and they were moving here after the war, and they did. And because of that, we suffered tremendous housing shortages. And because of that, we had to start building. That's one of the reasons that the San Fernando Valley began to flourish. But also, the affluent began building higher up in the hills. And the reason for that, before World War II, everybody took the choice prime flat lots all around Los Angeles, for example, Hancock Park, Windsor Square, Beverly Hills. And after World War II, they realized if they want their nice, beautiful home, they're going to have to build higher in the hills. And the reason they didn't do that before, to build up in the hills, it's much more expensive. Always was and always will be. Think about the sewers you have to put in, the electrical you have to put in. All those services cost a lot more putting them up into the hills. But after the returning GIs landed in Los Angeles, there was no choice but to go higher up in the hills. Because of that, Colcord could build a beautiful colonial house jutting out in all different directions on these irregular lots. Because up in the hills, you didn't have a grid system. The parcels were not rectangular. They jutted out in different directions because it was all hilly. And because of that, you could get a one-story colonial, which you would love, but then it jutted out in different directions according to the size of your lot, and you could take advantage of all the views and all the light. He was a master at blending it all together and created basically a unique design that hadn't been seen before in California.
And was there any kind of ethnicity?
Oh, sure. You knew about that.
Uh-huh.
Another reason his styles were so popular is you had a great deal of Jewish folks moving to America after World War II. And their attitude at the time was, we want to become acclimated to our new culture and community. The fastest way to do that was to build a colonial house. A colonial house in America was the most you needed to say. You were an American with a colonial house, and that look just exploded. It was a very subtle way of being patriotic and blending in to the community.
Well, now, with the fires, which are quite exceptional in terms of how they were created, if there was arson involved, and we've met many new friends in our new facility that were, say, the only house on the block that was saved.
Uh-huh.
But now they have to worry about the toxicity in terms of their furniture. Does it need to be reupholstered? What are the requirements for digging away the damage that was done not because they lost their house, but to save the furniture that's remaining.
Mm-hmm. You know, what's interesting in you mentioning that is the author we're speaking of, the architect we're speaking about, Gerard Colcord, a number of his homes were, you know, why do we say homes burn down but go up in flames?
Right.
It's an interesting dichotomy, but a number of homes were lost, and it's tragic because it's going to be very hard to rebuild. That style of house, and also the patina you can never recreate.
Right.
You can try, but if you have a discerning eye, it's been created. It hasn't been developed over decades. But we'll probably get a lot of colonial houses back there again. I think they will not have the same style that we're accustomed to. But as a realtor, give me a traditional house any day to sell. It is still immensely easier than selling one of these sexy, sleek glass homes up in the hills.
Yeah.
Those homes, they photograph really well and they look wonderful, particularly at night. But in my opinion, the only winners with those glass box houses is the Windex Corporation. They look great in photographs, but they don't wear well. They're very noisy inside. And enough of them have not sold for us to really know what the value is. They're very, very high maintenance. Mm-hmm. It's like pieces of sculpture, and they take a lot of maintenance. The Colcord homes, yes, any good home takes maintenance, but you don't need nearly as much because when you have wear and tear on these kind of homes, it just looks more wonderful.
Let's talk about the famous actress Audrey Hepburn.
Sure.
And her suite of rooms at Connie Wald.
Right.
And the fact that she didn't like to go to a lot of luxurious parties, Hollywood parties. She'd rather stay home, and she and Connie cook up a dinner.
Yeah.
And
that is probably one of Gerard Colcord's most famous homes, and it's called Barnett House. And by the way, homes are named by the family that commissioned them. In this case, Mr. and Mrs. Barnett commissioned this home in the late 30s in the flats of Beverly Hills. Even if a home has 10 owners afterwards, the home is still named after the first family that commissioned it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that's an old Southern tradition. But Barnett House in Beverly Hills was built by the Barnetts, and then with the onslaught of World War II, they sold the house very quickly, thinking that they were going to be bombed because Japanese subs had been seen in the Pacific.
Right.
So they sold their beautiful home for practically nothing to a couple, Jerry and Connie Wald. Well, Jerry Wald would grow up and become Jerry Wald, the producer, most well known for his little movie called Mildred Pierce, starring Joan Crawford.
Right.
And they bought the home in 1943. She told me that it was about $40,000. It was half the value at the time because people were so scared about the impending war. Well, Connie and Jerry were probably Hollywood's host and hostess. And Jerry was out producing fantastic movies, and Connie was home entertaining Hollywood. When I interviewed her in 2007, she was probably late 80s. She would die a few years later. She was incredible and wonderful and charming and welcoming. She was often, and you would know this, Joe, you've seen it, often inducted into the Fashion Hall of Fame. Right. Any kind of fashion list she was probably on in a very, very good way. She had style. She had been a clothing model for Claire McCardle in New York City before coming to Los Angeles and marrying Jerry. But she was absolutely terrific and full of every story you can imagine. But her claim to fame, besides being a natural hostess, I think she was naturally from Virginia, but she could cook. And she cooked every dinner herself. And she talked about even just easy chicken dinners that were so delicious. She had everybody in Hollywood at her dining table, every Saturday or Sunday night.
Wow.
And through this, many stars were friends of the Walds, but her closest friend would turn out to be Audrey Hepburn. And they spent so much time together that Audrey Hepburn would live in a suite at the house that Connie had built for Audrey in the 60s. She had Colcord come back and design the Audrey Hepburn suite. And it looked like a very glamorous treehouse.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you have stories on each one of these houses.
Yeah. these homes all have souls, and because they're such good houses, they've had notable people live in them. I mean, Colcord's homes have always been coveted, so they don't stay on the market very long because there's somebody in the wings waiting to buy it, or oftentimes the homes are handed down to a member of the family. They don't come on the market that often, and that says a lot about the integrity of the original design.
Absolutely. Any amusing stories about any of the other homes?
Oh, sure, there are many. One of my favorite interviews was with Bob Newhart and his wife, Jenny Newhart. And Bob died last year, and his wife, Jenny, died probably 3 or 4 years ago. But I had a wonderful interview with them. They were down to earth, had 4 kids. They were real. They didn't play the Hollywood game, but they were just a real solid family. They couldn't have been nicer. They answered every question. They were very giving and told some wonderful stories. One was their home was in the Tudor style, and it's one of those homes that you drive down the street and you just go, wait, that I want to see inside that house. It's wonderful.
Wasn't it a cover of AD?
Oh man, it was photographed in Architectural Digest. Even House Beautiful covered it, and that never happened. The magazines, that would have been too competitive, but the house was so good, both magazines picked it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was. They bought it in '74 for I think about $350,000. They bought it from Jerry Perenchio, the TV pioneering mogul who would partner with Norman Lear on projects and whatnot. But it was such a wonderful house that people would stop and they would want to see it. And the Newharts were very lovely people. There was one couple that was very persistent, so the Newharts gave them the plans to replicate the house, but also asked for a substantial donation to the church. Oh. And so they felt that was very fair, and their church got a nice donation, and the people would go and replicate the house. I believe in Colorado, they loved the house so much. Wow. But the best story of all was the daughter. Their youngest daughter would play on the gate at the entrance. And she and her friends would play on the gate and hit the button, and the gate would open and close while they're hanging on the gate. Well, not only did they enjoy that part, but they also enjoyed it when tourists would drive by, and they would have fun with the tourists from the street. And, we can't do that today. But 40 and 50 years ago, it was innocent fun, and everybody just loved it.
Lemonade stands?
They probably did. I don't remember her saying that part, but she said they used to love to play on the gate and tease the tourists.
Right. And any other stories?
Oh, sure. A favorite one was with Harrison Ford. And he had a beautiful Colcord Country Colonial in Brentwood Heights. It was a one-story at the time, which was a very common style for Colcord during the 50s. Well, Harrison bought it in the early 80s, and he wanted to put a second story on it. So he had Colcord come back and designed a flawless second story. You'd never know the house had been altered. Well, Colcord died in the middle of the project. So Colcord's assistant, Liza, Liza Kent, originally from Germany, would finish the project. They got along so well because Liza was very precise. And Harrison, in another life, was a contractor, not a contractor, but a carpenter, and loved the entire process. I don't think there was any celebrity adulation here. I think they just both admired each other very much. And Harrison often will quote Lisa's favorite saying, which is, "There is always room for better." Oh. Yeah, and in some interviews you'll hear Harrison saying that. And so here was a German lady, very precise, and telling Harrison Ford, how to live a good life.
Right.
Yeah, a beautiful, beautiful house. And I got to him through a friend of mine who knew his talent manager, and he was very ingratiating. Took me into every room of his house. I forgot he was Harrison Ford. He was just a man who loved his house and had a spectacular early American art collection that you, first of all, wouldn't expect him to have, and second of all, you wouldn't expect that to be in Los Angeles. Absolutely museum quality, sublime collection.
Wow.
Yeah, he would sell the house. It's had a couple of owners since, but he was delightful. And once I forgot who he was, it was just like talking to a wonderful neighbor. He was a lovely, lovely guy. I've seen him at the Hollywood Bowl before, and we talk about, Liza and that saying, there's always room for better. And
now, how did you find Liza?
Oh, that was fun. I found her through a woman who had a coal court house that I simply visited. And we had a really good time. I was sincerely admiring the house. It was a very well done coal court. And she said, I can tell you're really interested in this whole process and the house and the architect. I have a phone number for his last assistant. Why don't you give her a call? She should still be alive, and see what happens. So I got home and called, and the number was good. Lisa was elderly and lived with her granddaughter, her adult granddaughter, in San Diego. I called, and Lisa said, "Come on down." And so I did. I think the next week I was there, and I sat down. She had a lovely house that she had designed in actually Fallbrook, outside of San Diego. And she had a lovely lunch, and we had a lovely conversation, and I thought that would be the extent of it. She couldn't have been nicer. And I think she was probably about 85 or 86 at the time. And she said, "Bret, why don't you go out into the garage, and I've got some coal cord things there, and if you see anything you like, you can borrow it." She was quite lovely. And so I went into the garage, and it was like a kid in a candy store. Wow. She was from Germany. She had flat files lined up like a Mercedes dealership, probably like a Mercedes factory. Wow. Every single thing he had done, she had saved. The office had closed 10 years prior, but she saved everything meticulously. So I copied down every single address I could find and wrote every address a letter to whom it may concern. And I'd like to see her house. I'm contemplating a book about Gerard Colcord. And I would end up doing 300 interviews. So I basically never knew who would open the door, and I just kind of turned it into a game, and it was great fun. Yeah. Wonderful fun.
Wow. And I love your expression, kid in the candy store.
Yeah. Oh, it was heaven. It was just wonderful. And, and the archives were destined for the dump. There was a son-in-law that didn't see the value in them. Now, they are not in a landfill. Everything got saved. He simply did. He was a lovely guy, but he didn't know what he had. Yeah. And so everything is safe and secure. But, Colcord's an artist. You'll see that in the book. He could draw, which few architects can even do today.
Will many of these homes be restored and rebuilt?
Well, they certainly can be. The problem with that today is, first of all, you have to find the materials. And high quality materials are hard to find. So much today is engineered under the guise of, it's better this way. Well, it's not. Everybody knows a 2x4 today doesn't measure 2x4. It's smaller than that. But Colcord homes would have been, redwood 2x4s that measured 2x4. And also in the era when these homes were built, it was very prestigious for a son to work for his father. You'll have a lot of company names, father and son. And a son was proud to work for his craftsman father. And so that's why these homes could be built in as little as 9 months, because everybody knew how to do it. And you don't have that today. After World War II, the returning GIs came home. They didn't work for Dad anymore. They went out to industry and made more money.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now, when you think of the devastation that happened here in L.A., how many were destroyed by the fires?
Well, in the Palisades alone, they say about 6,000 homes are no longer. Mm-hmm. Probably 1,000 of those homes were done by notable architects. No one understands this, but the Palisades was developed in the 20s. It really took off after World War II. But nonetheless, you had stunning structures there that, sure, you can rebuild them, but will they be as good as they were? Probably not. There are people out there that are willing to take the time and the expense to do that. I've been lunching with a number of architects and contractors, and you can do anything if you have a checkbook. Mm-hmm. But the time frame to get something done today, I think people are willing to compromise because they want their home. And in LA, if everything's going correctly, it takes 3 years to build a house anyway. We're now looking at 5 years before you'll be walking through your new front door.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. It's just so interesting that I see a book in the future for you, the 10 most interesting homes that are no longer, mm-hmm. and why. And you've certainly written about your fair share of famous LA architects.
You know, another piece that people don't understand is LA has always been prone to fires. It's not necessarily climate change because this has been going on for hundreds of years. The Indians discovered that. So, you know, the Native Americans that were here and would not build in certain areas because of wildfires. So LA is very easy to think of in terms of glamour, but we have always had issues here. And we have built where we shouldn't build. So are we going to be smart enough and build where we should build, or are we going to forget the future and do what we want to satisfy ourselves right now? LA has a checkbook and they can get what they want right now. And I worry that we will just be in another situation in 50 years like we are in right now. And it's grim.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because in many ways there might even be some arson involved. They've talked about the possibility of nature not only was the cause, but there was also some help possibly.
Sure. We're very, very short-sighted because we're so rich. A checkbook can buy us out of anything, but that's getting harder and harder to do. You know, I had a geology teacher in college, and he said, Mother Nature will always win. That's always been in my mind because he's absolutely correct. You know, we think we have the upper hand because we're intelligent, we're affluent, and we benefit by many things. But Mother Nature, excuse the term, will trump us every time. And it's worth noting because we have to do it right. I think that's why I like Colcord so much, because he did it right. That era did it right. I think we do things too fast today, and we're paying the price for it.
Well, I always feel the classics. And my granddaughter, who's in college now in Florence, Italy, she is studying the art of marketing fashion. And I always caution her. I said, keep the classics as the basis. And I've even sent her videos of Dior and Schiaparelli and Armani. And she was lucky to be able to go to Fashion Week in Milan because it's one of the fashion capitals today. And it's really fun to see someone enjoying what she's learning. And that's the true, I think.
Well, you know, it's interesting you bring that up because the classics in any art form always win.
Yeah.
Why do we still love a brownie? Why do we still love Chanel?
Right.
Why do we still love a colonial house? You know, why do we still love a classic interior? It's because they have all stood the test of time. And sure, we'll tweak them here and there, but they last because they resonate with us. You know, we're born with a brain that automatically seeks balance and harmony. We're wired that way. That's why we love symmetry. We may not know what we're experiencing, but our brain is happier when it sees something symmetrical. It doesn't mean it can't deal with something asymmetrical, but we keep going back to line and balance and proportion. And when you apply that to any art form, you're going to get better output. And of course, my world is houses, you know, being an author of house books and a realtor, you know, selling them. The classics always prevail. And when we started a moment ago, I had said, give me a traditional or give me a colonial house any day to sell. It's infinitely easier. Now, real estate's a tough job, but give me classic product, it is infinitely easier to sell because people relate to it naturally.
Look at Ralph Lauren.
Sure.
And look at...
Classic example.
Exactly. There was a book that I gave to my granddaughter called The Battle at Versailles. And that was Miss Lambert, who offered to do a contest between the top houses in Paris and the American sportswear designers. And they were the first to introduce sportswear where the French became much more sophisticated, and the winner being the American sportswear industry, which just won by a mile, and it was hoi polloi that attended the show at Versailles for the benefit of Versailles. And I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
I found it.
Well, the classics endure. I do a lot of lecturing, and I remember giving a lecture at UCLA about cold cord. I gave many topics there, but on cold cord. And he designed the house that they used as the set inspiration for I Love Lucy.
When they moved to Connecticut.
Exactly. In 1956, Desi Arnaz realized that I Love Lucy needed a story change. It would be their last year of production of I Love Lucy. And he looked to America as to what was happening. In 1956, we were about 10 years after World War II. People were becoming more affluent. They would move to the country. So right. Desi Arnaz mimicked that in the show. Hence, they moved to Connecticut. And we had a wonderful magazine in the Los Angeles Times every Sunday, the Home magazine. It's still talked about today. Right. It was probably ahead of its time and very well done. There was a home in Bel Air called Wolf House on Bellagio, and that was featured very prominently because it was this new country colonial that was sweeping Southern California. It got a great deal of editorial coverage, and deservedly so. Well, Desi Arnaz read that article, and he said, "There's the set." Right. And so that set that we see on TV was built in 4 days, and that would finish up the last season of I Love Lucy. Well, it's classic. It's America. It's just wonderful. It's full of heart and soul, and notice a great big fireplace everyone should remember. Right. What was funny, though, is I talked to the head of the fan club of the I Love Lucy, and he said that when they built that set, they did it so quickly they didn't realize how wide the set was. It was 3 times wider than the New York apartment set, but nobody thought about it. Right. Well, in so doing, they had to change all their scripts to get the actors up and down the stage because it was so wide. That's why they had those crazy scenes, and particularly everyone will remember the dance scene where they crush all the eggs together learning the tango. They did that so that they could move the actors up and down the stage. In the New York apartment, they only had to take a few steps. On the Connecticut set, they had to take many feet in order to utilize the set.
Well, that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, nobody thinks of those things, but it all comes back to architecture because we all need shelter, and done properly, it really enhances our life whether we know it or not.
I remember when you took us through a house that was very sort of classic, and yet when you came to the family room, it looked like a piece of cold cord. And that was a famous architect.
Well, at the time, L.A. exploded with classic mansions in the 20s and 30s. After World War II, people wanted things to be refreshed, and they would oftentimes redo the family room, oftentimes with acoustical ceilings and sliding glass doors. But if you knew what you were doing, you called cold cord and had him come do a classic cold cord den for you. And although it didn't technically go with the house, the feeling did, and you felt good in that room, and it was a little bit more informal, and you could relax a little bit more. Right. That happened, a number of times. I've been in great houses, and you get to the den, usually the room that overlooks the backyard and the pool, and you realize something's incongruent, although it's terrific.
Right.
And then you learn what happened.
Well, in many of the houses in Hancock Park are guilty of that.
Oh, sure.
And yet, at the same time, you have said to me, I've got some humorous stories on some of these houses. Can you share one?
Oh, sure. There was one lady, she was in her 80s, and we were doing the interview. She was a former school teacher. It's interesting, the majority of owners that I spoke to, they were either in the entertainment business, or they were school teachers, or they were lawyers. That pattern, and a majority were Jewish. It was about acclimating to colonial America.
Right.
They were all wonderful in their own way, but this lady, the former school teacher, we were doing the interview in the living room, and we were looking out a large, picture window in the front, looking out onto the street, and there was a gardener that was mowing the lawn of a neighbor's house. And, you don't really think too much about that. And she paused and said, "See that gardener there?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Oh, well, he's having an affair with the lady next door." and she just said it very matter-of-factly and just as if it was, just a comma in a sentence.
Right.
But these people are absolutely wonderful. There was one, a very, very prominent, high-profile, successful lawyer. And I really didn't know what to expect. But he answered the door with a bag of Cheetos and some Diet Cokes and said, "Hey, kid, come on in." And we had great fun. He could probably, tear anybody up in court, but in his home, in his coal cord, he was a pussycat. Could not have been a lovelier, more down-to-earth guy. And then along that same ilk was Bernie Brillstein, a major producer. He started out working with Elvis and would produce The Sopranos and the Muppet movies, and just a stellar career. I did an interview with him at his home, and it was the night of the Golden Globes. We had never met before. I was a stranger. He invited me in. He goes, "Hey, kid, I got to watch my clients on TV. You go tour the house yourself and come back when you're ready." And so here I am in his bathroom, thinking, probably everybody in the entertainment business would love to be in Bernie's bathroom.
Right.
And here I am, and he's nowhere to be seen. He's in the den watching his clients on the Golden Globes. And I thought, this is really something. I loved it for several different reasons. That at that time people could still trust each other. Obviously, I'd made a decent impression. He trusted me to be in his home. But it just goes to show that, even in the loftier realms of Beverly Hills and Bel Air and entertainment and great affluence, people really are down to earth.
Yeah.
That it's, they have a lot of toys, but we're all kind of together, down to earth, and we're all in the same boat. We better treat each other well.
Well, I remember working with a lot of celebrities, and Phyllis Diller was not what she pretended to be.
Right.
She was a very elegant lady.
Mm-hmm.
And loved to entertain. And she inherited, or I guess purchased, Merriweather Post, her China collection.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yes, and she loved to show it off. And I worked with her, and she was really a down-to-earth lady, but a very elegant style.
Yeah.
And that nutsy kind of imitation that she would do was not really who she was.
I saw an interview with Joan Rivers who referenced that and said that in the days when Phyllis Diller became prominent, women comics had to do something goofy to get attention.
Yeah.
Yet Joan said she could wear the most elegant Dior suit and was the antithesis of her stage persona.
And a good cook.
Yeah.
Down to earth.
And a great house, South Rockingham in Brentwood Park.
Yes.
Yeah. She had very good taste in houses.
She did, and she had the Bob Hope suite with a portrait of Bob Hope. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that because she credited Bob Hope with her success.
Yeah. Going back to Connie Wald, whose husband was Jerry Wald, the producer, she said to me, "Remember, Bret, L.A. is a great big small town."
Isn't that the truth? Exactly.
And you better keep your nose clean because everyone is going to know what you've been up to, whether positive or negative, and it's going to travel like wildfire. Your neighbor's going to learn what you're doing faster than the internet.
But you were a good salesman. You were sincere. People trusted you.
Yeah.
And I remember Audrey Hepburn's environment and the fact that I was able to buy a piece of furniture that was in her house. And now I have given it to you.
I know. Everything really is full circle.
Comes around, right.
But it's interesting, that chair that you gifted me with is a classic design.
Right.
It'll endure for centuries.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Here we go again, classics.
Everything is good, but the classics endure, and I personally love anything classic because it means we haven't torn up the environment to build something new.
That's true.
It's something with some patina and some history, and it's great value, and you're using something and not polluting the environment.
Well, you are a friend of this show. You always have something interesting to say. Now, what is going to happen with the rebuild of LA?
I had lunch with a terrific architect the other day, and he basically painted a negative story and a positive story. There will be people that put the time and effort into doing it properly and could very well end up building something better than what was there. So that's a positive. The negative is people who want any kind of home to live in. They want their home back right now. The Palisades is probably one of the most beautiful communities in the world. They want to get home, and they are going to take the cheap shortcut to get something built that they can live in. And it's kind of where we are in the world. Everyone's either on one side or the other. I think the same thing is going to happen with homes. We're going to get terrific homes, or we're going to get lousy homes. I wish it wasn't that way, but hopefully the terrific ones will outshine the others. My big concern is you're going to be in a construction zone for 5 years, and you're going to be breathing a lot of toxicity. And a very interesting aspect in speaking to someone a couple of weeks ago, it's almost unfortunate if your house didn't burn down. First of all, you're not going to get the same insurance payout, but what has probably happened due to the severe heat of the fire, all your plumbing and electrical within the walls that you don't see has probably melted. We use so much plastic in our products that the heat has probably compromised every system in your house. It's all going to have to be redone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
You always inspire us all, and thank you.
You're welcome. Very happy to do this.